No matter how amazing certain NBA teams and their GMs seem at signing, trading, and moving players, let's not forget, none of them are perfect. They've all made mistakes, and we're going to prove that by looking at one current player every NBA team gave up on way too soon. Players that pretty soon after they let them walk or traded them quickly became a lot better. The team didn't think they'd be good, but these players quickly proved them wrong. And looking back, it makes that team look bad. So here we go. First off with the Atlanta Hawks, who as we know had Luka Doncic in their possession for a split second, but traded back to the Mavs so they could get Trae Young instead. They could have had Luka, but they didn't think he was a good fit, basically meaning they gave up on him, and now he's a unanimous top 10 player in the NBA. That one hurts. For Minnesota, they still have just one of the absolute worst examples of giving up too soon with Zach LaVine. He was 21 years old, averaging 19 a game on almost 40% from 3, and they traded him as the main piece for Jimmy Butler. We all know how that went, and now Zach's 25 years old and just averaged 25, 4, and 4 for the Bulls. While the Wolves had to use their first overall pick on a shooting guard because they didn't have one. Just never give up on a player that young showing that much potential. Plus, it hurts that much more knowing they traded him and the pick that was Lauri Markkanen for Butler. So essentially, you could say they gave up on him too. Now, surprisingly, I couldn't find anything for the Nets. I mean, you can't say D'Angelo Russell because he turned into Kevin Durant for them. You can't go back further and say Brook Lopez because he was a part of the deal that landed them Russell in the first place. And you can't even say a guy like Bojan Bogdanovic because he was traded for the pick that landed them Jared Allen. So good work, Brooklyn. The Hornets are obviously going to have players in this category though, because they're the Hornets. And this one hurts even for their standards. I mean, they're set now because they have Rozier, Graham, and LaMelo, but they didn't know that'd be the case in 2018 when they drafted Shai Gilgeous-Alexander 11th overall, actually had him on the team, then traded him right away for the 12th pick and 2 second-rounders, which turned out to be Miles Bridges. No surprise though for Charlotte. As for the Chicago Bulls, they've clearly dealt with not having a point guard for the past few years. Kobe White's looking good now, but before him in 2016, they had 5 point guards on the roster. Cameron Payne, Rajon Rondo, Michael Carter-Williams, Jerian Grant, and Spencer Dinwiddie. And of course, out of all of them, they waived Dinwiddie. They could definitely be using a guy like him so much right now, but instead gave up on him way too early. While the Cleveland Cavaliers also gave up on a member of the current day Brooklyn Nets, and that's Joe Harris because they originally drafted him in 2014, barely played him for his first 2 years, then traded him for a second round pick to Brooklyn. And once he got there, they played him, and he finished the year off averaging nearly 40% from 3, and has easily done that every year since. I'm sure LeBron really would have appreciated having a guy like him on the roster his last 2 years there, but instead, he didn't. For Dallas, Mark Cuban made one of the more serious mistakes in recent memory in 2011. Tyson Chandler was the Mavs' defensive anchor for their 2011 championship, and when his contract ran out, Cuban chose not to re-sign any veterans to long-term deals to instead help their future, but that ruined their chance to run it back in 2012 as reigning champions. So he let Chandler sign with New York, where he instantly became Defensive Player of the Year that next season. So he definitely gave up on him too soon because Dallas could have possibly had another title. The Denver Nuggets nearly made just as big of a mistake themselves because in 2013 and 2017 they drafted Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell and traded them both on draft night to the Jazz. I don't know that it's giving up on them as much as just not giving them a chance, but either way, they're just lucky they're in a good position now, or those mistakes would have looked a lot worse. The Detroit Pistons, on the other hand, gave up Chris Middleton way too early. Sure, he was only a second round pick, but they traded him in a deal for Brandon Jennings. And as we know, Chris has slowly but surely developed into an all-star. The Golden State Warriors then have one you might not have known, because in 2018, after going undrafted, they signed Kendrick Nunn to a deal so he could play on their G League team. And after averaging 23 and 2 off the bench, they waived him. I mean, I don't know how much more you could want from someone, but then he signs with the Heat this year and was in real Rookie of the Year talks all season long. Now, if you're a fan of the Houston Rockets, you might want to turn away for this one, because they've had a young Marcus Morris who they drafted, Lou Williams the year before he won 2 straight six-man awards for the Clippers, and Montrezl Harrell in 2017, 3 years before he won his. The Pacers don't really have one. I would say Bojan Bogdanovic, but he chose to leave. Indiana didn't give up on him. The Clippers are in a similar position too, because they also don't have one. It would be Eric Bledsoe because back in the early 2010s, as their sixth man, he was showing a lot of potential before they traded him for JJ Redick. But given the setup of their team at the time, it was a good move, so they got a pass. And okay, we can't really complain here for the Lakers. Based on where they're at now, they may have given up on players too early, but it was all worth it because it led to getting LeBron, Anthony Davis, and their championship. It would have been dumb not to trade away their young players, but in total, to to make way for the team that they have today, they've given up on Brandon Ingram, D'Angelo Russell, Lonzo Ball, Julius Randle, Lou Williams, don't forget, Brooke Lopez, and Jordan Clarkson. All guys that have done big things since leaving. Boston's a different one though for different reasons, because they gave up on Isaiah Thomas too early. Now from a team business perspective, it was definitely the best thing they could have done, and it's why they're at where they are now. But from a moral standpoint and how they treated him while he was injured, in that aspect, they gave up on him before they should have. The Memphis Grizzlies get a pass for their situation though, because some could say that they gave up on Kyle Lowry too early. I mean, he played there for 1 year before they drafted Mike Conley, gave him the starting spot and traded Kyle in year 3, and then stayed with Conley for years, who was never an all-star while Lowry has been 6 times. The only reason they get a pass though is because it took Kyle 8 years to become an all-star, so it's understandable they didn't want to wait that long. For the Miami Heat, it's not a big one, but they did trade for Patrick Beverley on draft night in 2009, but then cut him before he ever played a game for them. He then spent 4 years overseas before returning to the NBA with the Rockets, and has been a starter in the league every year for the past 7 since then. Now switching over to the Bucks, if Giannis ever leaves them, look at them messing up the Bogdanovich deal, but more importantly, look at them giving up on Malcolm Brogdon way too soon. He had just finished the very rare 50-40-90 season for them, and they let him walk away so they could sign Chris Middleton to a max deal. Well, this year in the playoffs, the two put up very similar numbers while Malcolm's making half as much money. And it's almost just as bad for the New Orleans Pelicans. They drafted Buddy Hield 6th overall. He started out slow for them, so they traded him in a deal for DeMarcus Cousins in his rookie season. Well, he finished that season off with the Kings, averaging 15 a game on 42% from 3, and has only gotten better since then. I get that they had to try to get DeMarcus to give Davis another star to play with, but based on how things turned out, they should have given Hield a little bit longer. As for the New York Knicks, they have 2. The first is Jeremy Lin. We all know Linsanity. Jeremy was on fire, so going into the offseason, the Knicks said they would match any deal offered for Lin up to $1 billion. But then the Rockets offered him $25 million over 3 years, and they let him go. $25 million, $1 billion, close enough. But who knows how much longer Linsanity would have continued in the Knicks system. Then also, I think we can say the Knicks gave up on Kristaps Porzingis. They said that they felt that he wanted to be traded, so they did it. Didn't try to make him happy, didn't try to work it out, didn't really ask him his real feelings, and that's why they're at where they are today. Then of course, as we all know, the OKC Thunder made a similar huge mistake by letting James Harden walk back in 2012. They didn't really want to pay the luxury tax, so they didn't offer him enough money, and instead traded the future league MVP to the Rockets. The Orlando Magic then pretty much created the concept for this video idea when they, for some reason, I still don't know why, traded newly drafted Domantas Sabonis and third-year Victor Oladipo for Serge Ibaka. On the contrary, we've mostly looked at young players, but I think the 76ers recently gave up on JJ Redick too soon. In recent years where they've desperately needed floor spacing, they chose to not re-sign him and let him go to the Pelicans instead. So that was another head scratcher. For the Suns, seeing how they've had absolutely no point guard for the last couple of years recently, it hurt knowing at one point they had a 25-year-old Isaiah Thomas. It hurts even more knowing that they only kept him for a half a season before trading him to the Celtics, where the very next year he became an all-star for the first time, and the year after that he had his 29 point per game near MVP level season. But hey, at least on the bright side, they got Marcus Thornton. I don't have one for the Portland Trailblazers, so I'll switch it up and say that while in Portland, LaMarcus Aldridge gave up on Damian Lillard too soon. Had he known what Dame would become, he would have had a much better chance at a title staying with him in Portland than he's had being on the Spurs. The Kings, on the other hand, have missed out on a ton over the years, and they definitely also gave up on Isaiah Thomas too early. He was averaging 20 and 6 before they traded him, so it really makes no sense. Plus, they also recently let Bogdan walk, which was a mistake. Unsurprisingly, I couldn't really find anyone for the Spurs because they have a history of being very good at scouting talent. The Toronto Raptors then at one point had PJ Tucker, and they actually drafted him. Then he went to play overseas and came back 6 years later as an elite defender who was pretty good on offense. So in 2017, they traded to get him back and offered him a good deal to keep him, but he took less money in 2017 to leave the Raptors and go play for the Houston Rockets to win a championship. But don't forget, that was the year before the Raptors won the title. Just imagine that. Now, some would say the Utah Jazz gave up on Gordon Hayward too early, and they may have, and at the time, it did seem like it. He was a 26-year-old first-time All-Star that they just let walk, but seeing how things have turned out since then, it looks like they made the right call. And finally, the Washington Wizards gave up on Kelly Oubre way too early. Sure, he still wasn't playing great when they traded him, but he was only 22 when they exchanged him for Trevor Ariza, who only played there for 2 pointless seasons, while now Oubre's averaging almost 20 a game. And that's gonna wrap things things up. Which of these do you think was the biggest mistake? Comment down below and let me know. Like the video if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll catch you next video.